When We Disagree is a show about arguments, how we have them, why we have them, and their impact on our relationships and ourselves. More options should make us happier, right? The psychologist Barry Schwartz discovered the opposite. Too many choices can paralyze us, increase regret, and decrease satisfaction. This paradox of choice explains why people are more stressed in abundance than in scarcity sometimes. In disagreements, the paradox of choice makes every decision a battlefield, with infinite alternatives making any choice feel potentially wrong, or constant FOMO. Relationships can suffer from this paradox too. Dating apps offer endless options, making commitment feel like closing doors rather than opening them. Every relationship conflict can trigger thoughts of what if? What if there's someone who would have been better, easier, more fun, more compatible? This abundance of alternatives, or just the perception of the abundance of alternatives, makes working through the problem seem foolish when you could just swipe right on someone new, or swipe right on a different conversation. Even choosing a restaurant becomes fraught when there are hundreds of options. In workplace decisions, the paradox of choice can create analysis paralysis. Teams spend months evaluating software options instead of implementing solutions. Committees endlessly debate alternatives without deciding anything. The perfect becomes the enemy of the good, and the good becomes the enemy of the done. More options don't necessarily improve decisions, they can really prevent them. Understanding the paradox of choice offers some relief. Sacrificing, choosing something not good enough, or just good enough, often leads to more happiness than maximizing. Setting constraints, we'll only consider 3 options, can reduce stress and improve outcomes. In disagreements about choices, recognize that more research won't necessarily always clarify. Sometimes we gotta just choose and commit, and the best choice is often the one that you stop second guessing. I'm Michael Lee, Professor of Communication and Director of the Civility Initiative at the College of Charleston. Our guest today on When We Disagree is Stephen Olikara. Stephen is a nationally recognized changemaker, political commentator, and entrepreneur. He is the founding CEO of Bridge Entertainment Labs, which is dedicated to harnessing storytelling entertainment media to transform political divisions in the United States. He is also the founder and former CEO of Future Caucus, the largest nonprofit organization of young elected leaders in the U.S. Stephen's political commentary and analysis have been featured on CNN, NBC News, Fox News, and a million other outlets. He recently made history as the first South Asian candidate for the U.S. Senate in Wisconsin, garnering national attention for his debate performance and his fresh approach. And Stephen's journey is featured in the documentary film The Reunited States on Amazon Prime and PBS. Stephen, tell us an argument story.
Michael, thank you for having me. I think what's top of mind for me right now is the issue of immigration and the story of what's unfolding in Minneapolis right now. First, I'm a Midwesterner, so I grew up in Wisconsin. I always pay extra attention when we have these stories of polarization taking place in the Midwest. And I think the challenge of immigration is a good lens to understand the divisions in our country, the system that profits on people hating each other, what I call the division industrial complex, because the issue is not just about some horrible tragedies that have happened, people like Miss Renee Good, who was killed by ICE. It's also about the inability for a country to solve the root problems of immigration. It's about how the story gets framed in tribal ways as soon as a tragedy like this happens. And what we miss through all of that noise is the fact that most Americans want to see a legal law enforcement process with immigration. They want to see a border that's secure. They want a humane way to address the over 10 million people who are here illegally in our country. And the issue that needs to be talked about more is that immigration as an issue is so profitable for the division industrial complex, which includes the 2 major political parties, that it's more profitable to keep the issue on the ballot and on our social media screens than it is to actually resolve it. And that's what I'm fired up about and want to pull the curtain back on so that we can approach this with real solutions.
I'm a Southerner by birth, and I live in Charleston, South Carolina, where I have for 17 years, and I went to school at the University of Georgia in Louisville for some time, and yada, yada, yada. And yet I spent 7 years living in Minneapolis and did graduate work at the University of Minnesota. And there is something just utterly bizarre about seeing how much attention and how much of a flashpoint a specific area of one mid-sized American city has become over the last 6 years, ranging from Renee Good to Alex Preddy to George Floyd, just 20 blocks away from those incidents. And then this summer, we have the shooting at the Church of Annunciation, which is in a very similar adjacent neighborhood to those, in addition to the suburban political assassinations this past summer in 2025. And so this is a lot to put on one nation, but it's certainly a lot to put on one city as well. What really struck me is your phrase, and I've never heard this before, and I'd love to hear you out on this, the division industrial complex. Take us through how you conceptualize what that is.
Well, first, it's based on firsthand experiences that I've had in politics and media and seeing firsthand how the system works behind the scenes.
Hmm.
And I think if people could see more of the behind the scenes, their blood pressures would actually it would go up because of their outrage of how the system works, but it would actually, I think, also go down in their daily lives, their interactions with friends and family members, because they would see a lot of these divisions are manufactured for profit. They would know that their friend who might be on a different social media algorithm or tuning into different news, you don't have to hate them. They're tuning into something a little bit different than you, especially if you have a deeper foundation of love and trust. So to break it down, there are three main components to the division industrial complex. The first is political elites and operatives. The second is traditional media, and third is social media algorithms. And just to break those down a little bit further, political operatives are well versed in the dark arts of politics, and they make a lot of money and gain a lot of influence by dividing people. Good example of this is the emails and text messages you get from campaigns. They're framed extremely divisively as us versus them in very kind of existential terms. And people at home should know, A, their goal is to extract dollars from your wallet, but two, is half the time, maybe more than half the time, those operatives don't believe the division that they're selling in those messages. And so that's one piece of it. The second with media, so much of our conversations are framed as us versus them because the traditional model is having a Democratic and Republican strategist teed up against each other. I can speak for firsthand as an independent political commentator who's done all the cable news stations. I've had in my ear before having a producer tell me, please disagree more with the other side. And they want more sparks. They want more of the WWE kind of entertainment value. I love entertainment and I spend a decent amount of my career in entertainment right now. The idea that you have to set it up as a zero sum us versus them predictable debates to me is not compelling entertainment. What's more compelling is nuanced, independent discussions on what's really going on. Third piece is algorithms, and I think people are familiar with this thanks to the Social Dilemma documentary,
Mhm.
among their own, as well as their own personal interactions with social media. I think people know that the algorithms are supercharging these divisions. So you add those things together, multi-billion dollar industry that turns us against each other.
You are the founding CEO of Bridge Entertainment Labs and lots of media experience. Is there any money in connecting people? We have this division industrial complex, but you seem like you have some stake in the game to figure out whether there's any money in the reverse.
Yes. Well, I think, first there's the news, hard news media side of this conversation, and then there's the storytelling entertainment piece. Let me start with the entertainment because I just came back from the Sundance Film Festival where I collaborated with and saw firsthand a number of compelling films and stories that are about human connection. One that premiered was called Union County,
Mm.
which is about a story that takes place in Ohio, has a A-list actor named Noah Centineo who acts in that film and addresses the substance abuse crisis that happens in many communities across America. That to me was a very humanizing film that goes beyond left and right and goes beyond a lot of our divisions. You can also look at a more, I guess, mainstream TV show like Ted Lasso, which is all about connection across the lines of difference. Very successful
Hmm.
TV show. There are many films and TV shows out there that I think do a good job of this. I think what lacks usually is imagination and risk taking. You know, Ted Lasso, for example, was not a, you know, there is a reason why it was on Apple Plus because a lot of the other distributors didn't pick it up. Then this show helped to elevate Apple Plus into the streamer that it is today. I think Pixar does a lot of great work, and you know, a film like Inside Out 2 isn't inherently political, but it talks about how we address emotions in our daily lives that can help us show up in a better way.
Hmm.
That's on the entertainment side. Um, and I think storytelling does have a unique ability to transport people into a lived experience that's different than their own and empathize with it. There's a lot of social science research behind this called vicarious contact theory that shows that a great story that you're really immersed in, you can really connect with a different life experience. Now, hard news side, I'll say you're seeing the destruction of the old model. All the incumbent media platforms are losing viewership. CBS News is trying to be something different. We'll see where that lands, but you have this entirely new independent space that's growing rapidly. And I choose to show up particularly on platforms that are trying to reinvent the model to be a little bit more nuanced. Platforms like News Nation, which is a cable news outlet, The Hill, um, Two Way is an exciting new platform that I show up on every week. There's a show that I've been co-hosting recently called The Group Chat. And so those, if you just look at the trend lines, those are the types of platforms that are growing. The old zero sum model is represent the platforms that are losing viewership. And I still think there's space to create something new and different and on the hard news side.
Some of the social science research that you cite gives me hope. Some of the social science research that you cite specifically about negativity bias can make me feel a little bit cynical. And my cynicism shows up in this argument, and I'd love for you to demystify how you think about this too, because this is where we can lose some sleep, which is that because humans are wired for a negativity bias, it can make us more inclined to seek out media that activates us in a negative cortisol sense. And so that producer has a good idea about what is going to titillate the audience when he screams in your ear, please disagree more forcefully with the other side. They're not saying, be nicer to the other side or find some common ground at this moment. And so my fear is that we can be radicalized at scale via media more quickly than we can de-radicalize each other individually through one-to-one human connections.
Yeah, yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. In fact, at the Sundance Festival, one exercise we did with the storytellers there is called turning judgment into curiosity. And the premise of that is yes, our minds are hardwired. You call it the negativity bias. We are hardwired in some ways for judgment, like quick judgments. And yet, part of the exercise showed that just as you're rushing to judgment, we gave an example of two individuals' perspectives on guns, that you realize context and nuance can help shift your perspective to more curiosity. And it's something that takes reps. It's like exercising a muscle. There's a reason why the mindfulness and meditation movement has grown so much because we are trying to address some of the more sort of less productive tendencies of the human mind through a kind of stoicism, a controlling of some of our rash judgments and emotions that meditation can offer. So I do think so how do you scale that up? I mean, I think that's why organizations like ours, there's hundreds of groups out there, there's a whole movement out there to try and shift that paradigm. One reason why I partner with Arnold Schwarzenegger right now through the Schwarzenegger Institute is because I do think the muscle building metaphor is really useful for people to know that you have to take reps. You can't run a marathon without any training. And so we want to elevate the conversation, but it does take real work. One other additional piece I'll just briefly mention on the media side is about format. I do think, like, when we're talking about elevating the conversation and finding more unity in our country, that's not the absence of disagreement. That's the presence of understanding and connection. I think podcasts right now, like this one, provide that kind of space. The once minute soundbite on cable news, just as a format, doesn't really allow for that. And so I do think you can meet people where they are emotionally in a enhanced format like the podcast that gets at all the messiness of our disagreements and can also humanize people at the same time.
I've long done an exercise with students and when I do public events and talk about on this show, which is the firing line hypothetical, which was if Netflix got two experts, not famous people, two experts on any given topic, ranging from what is the meaning of life to gun control to abolishing the national speed limit or whatever the issue is. And they had a sober, caring, interesting, fairly rational, sometimes semi emotional, but not fireworks laden conversation slash debate about that issue. Would you watch that show? Or do you think that show would get renewed?
I think it's hard to say. I think there's a lot that would be good with that type of approach. I do want to say that I'm okay with some fireworks, you know. I'm
Mm-hmm.
okay
Okay.
with I used to speak every year at this conference called Politicon. It's like the Comic-Con for politics. I mean, it's like giant convention, tens of thousands of people come out for this. There are costumes, there's fun, it's high energy. The tagline of that was called Entertain Democracy. And you'd have some of the most diametrically opposed people on stage that would usually throw me in the middle of that, and you'd have like Ben Shapiro and Cenk Uygur. You would have Sean
Uh,
Hannity and James Carville. These are you can look this up on YouTube and see how these conversations went. And my approach with facilitating those debates and conversations was to say, like, I need the audience's attention. I want to make this fun for them. These folks are here kind of in a WWE kind of spirit. I still remember being in the green room with two of these commentators, and they're sharing photos of their kids. They're having these amazingly human and beautiful moments in the green room. Meanwhile, you can hear people stomping their feet. And it was like, I remember someone said, it's like, it's a Thunderdome out there and they want some blood. And so I try and navigate that where let's make this fun. I love political debate, you know, presidential debates. I look forward to them. At the same time, you can make it more about the issue and more about the spirit of a debate as opposed to demonizing and dehumanizing entire swaths of people. And I think that is a distinction that often gets lost here. Let's have fireworks and let's have real debate and let's have a good conversation.
yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I think I know where you're going with this, but I'm curious about how you draw that line as finely as you possibly can, because there are places where that line is not super bright. So on the one hand, you're saying we need to elevate the conversation. On the one hand, you're saying we need more reps with elevated conversation to get stronger at that. We need to make things less personal, less vitriolic. We need to take out division for division's sake, and all of that sort. You give an example of a producer, looking for blood, but then you're also anti is the wrong word, but
Boring.
you're anti-boring. Yeah, you also want joy, and as I
Yeah.
do, you also
Yes.
want
Huge.
a fun culture of healthy argument, which I also am living and dying for. But then you were also talking to a crowd that wants some blood sport.
Yeah. Well, I exactly. And I embrace the challenge of accomplishing those two things at the same time.
Hmm.
I think you know, I think one, we need to like this is an art form. And so I do think we need to elevate people who can achieve both at the same time and give them national platforms so that the American public can see models of entertaining, elevated discourse, because that then will kind of ripple out into our culture.
Hmm.
Um, I also think, um, yeah, I just think there's a failure of imagination to be thinking about it in that way. I think really boring conversations aren't going to attract people, and boring it means that it's I think there's important to think about this circumstantially because, for example, in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination or a major tragedy like we saw in Minneapolis, we need leaders who can truly elevate the conversation. You don't want to further inflame that. I would lift up an example like Governor Spencer Cox in Utah, who had put in those bridge building reps and really was able to channel emotion and elevate the conversation and cut through at the same time. Now, a different circumstance would be like a political debate on immigration that's not after a tragedy. It's in a context like Politicon, or people are there for the debate. Some people have seen these Jubilee debates take place on social media. And I think one of my biggest takeaways for the audience here is to recognize that like not to take not not to let me put it this way. In these green rooms, I'm seeing some of the most exciting political conversations happen. I want people to see those green rooms. I want people to also know that on screen, often it is a bit performative. And also, people are looking out for their pocketbooks. They want to get that contract on that campaign or on that media outlet. So they have to say certain things to get that. And so I want people to take that not only with a grain of salt, but also with the spirit of fun and joy. And just know that people enjoy WWE, enjoy some of these political debates a bit in a sort of entertainment spirit, not take everything so literally, even though these are very serious issues. I think if people understood the green room aspect of it, they would be having a little bit more fun with this.
In sum, there is this stream of pro-democratic discourse that we need to save our democracy, and some of it can sound a little like church. Like we need to be good soldiers for that cause and be sober as we approach it. In the same sense, dress up and get ready for church on Sunday morning and be a dutiful Christian soldier. And then the other thing is that it can sound a little like eating 3 squares a day and making sure you're getting enough roughage in your diet and you're eating your broccoli.
That's right.
It can strip the joy, the fun out of it as we pursue something like a more thoughtful, less distracted, less divisive public. In other words, is there a way that is more fun to get there? What I hear you saying is that some of the gladiatorial provocation, some of the peacocking, some of the end zone celebrations that we associate with WWE, football, you name it, are you not entertained culture is also possible to square with the idea that people can be getting smarter, a little less distracted, and a little less divisive at the same time.
Exactly. I think that's beautifully put. Are you not entertained? And again, and to the point about joy, I would argue that a lot of the conversations you see on cable news and network news related to politics, that's not joyful. I think I think sports is getting this. If you tune into some of the newer ESPN shows, like the Pat McAfee show, he gets that this should be a celebration. People want to feel not horrible when they consume their content. And so I think people kind of miss that in conversations about what's going on in our country and our world. So I love the "Are you not entertained" kind of metaphor here. And I think, for people who don't think that's possible, just literally YouTube search Politicon and some of these debates that we hosted there. And also check out the group chat on Two-Way. I want to be very specific here because I don't want to be speaking theoretically. Check out the group chat on Two-Way or any of the Two-Way programs that I've been a part of. I think that's modeling this idea.
Stephen Olacara, thanks so much for being on When We Disagree.
Thank you for having me.
When We Disagree is recorded at the College of Charleston with creator and host Michael Lee. Recording and sound engineering by Jesse Kunz and Lance Laidlaw. Reach out to us at whenwedisagree@gmail.com.